Welcome back. What's the new video going to be? Well, this video is actually not going to be glass blowing. We're back to woodworking real quick here. I'll make the story short. I had an extensive addition added to my house last year. Part of the addition was I installed a sound system in that room. And when I installed the sound system, there was well, first of all, I was completely rushed. And it was a bit of an afterthought once the framing was in place. If I had given it literally an extra day's worth of thought, I would have changed the way the room was framed to accommodate what I wanted, and I didn't do it. And I regret it, but the room is built. I now have to work around it. I am partially deaf. There's no doubt, there's no question to that. But one of the things I love is watching crappy action films and Star Wars and stuff like that on TV. So I have a big, huge TV, and I have an adequate sound system. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 speakers and 2 subwoofers. But to get the full effect of DTS surround, or whatever the newest, I don't even know what they call it anymore, the most hoopty sound, you actually need 9 speakers. So I have a Dolby 5.1 system in my basement that I've had since Dolby 5.1 came out back in the early 90s. It was one of those old satellite speaker systems made by a company called Mirage. I blew the speakers up because they were little tiny things one night. They sounded okay in the basement, but I popped them anyway. So I went out and I bought myself a set of Polk bookshelf speakers to put in the basement downstairs, which are completely perfect for down there. They're a little small, which is what I wanted for down there. I don't listen to many movies down there anymore. Right now, just that space is not utilized properly. So what I did was I went down into the basement, I grabbed my 2 Polk bookshelf speakers, and I brought them up and put them in the living room, the new living room, the TV room. But they're sitting on the floor. Now, if you know anything about the way sound works, it's very directional. Burning my fingers. So what I needed was 2 more speakers in the front. And I had existing speakers, so I brought them upstairs. I hooked them up to the system. I ran new wiring. That was the other thing too. You didn't see or don't see any wires. And that's what I want. So the eventual plan here is to build speakers, because the space that I need to put the new speakers in is very unique. And I can't find what I want in speakers. I can't find them for a reasonable price. You can get anything built. I'm a carpenter. I love electronics. I'm going to build speakers. That's not today's project. Today's project is making a stands for the bookshelf speakers. I could go buy them. Absolutely can go buy stands for the speakers. So I have to decide exactly how I want to do it. Now, there's a couple different ways I can do it, but the biggest issue I have right now is materials. I'm really running a little bit short on material lately, and I don't feel like going and buying any material. So we're going to build bases with material that I have on hand. Now, I've got, and I just did the math here, I have, I'm going to put this around here, I have 132 inches of material. I need a minimum of 78 inches of material. I need a minimum of 78 inches of material. I have 132 inches. And I have some leftover material. So, what am I going to do? Well, I have these. I made these for another project. I made these for another project that I had. A friend of mine asked me to build him a table. So I built him a table. My game plan was originally to build like a basically just a little table. So it would be, I can't draw it backwards, so it would be that. So basically just a little four-legged table that would have been about 11 and a half inches wide, 11 and a half inches deep, 8 inches wide, and 16 inches tall. Or that's how tall the speakers are, 13 inches tall. I don't think I'm going to do that. I think the most viable way to do it is actually to do a post. So I'm going to do a base. For somebody with dyslexia, I think I should be able to write backwards. I'm going to do a base with a single pin and then like a platform to set the speakers on. I think that's what I'm going to do. So, next step is to figure out how much material I have that I can do to build these things out of. Now, I got a couple little advantages here. I do have some plywood floating around, but I don't want anybody to see any plywood. So we need to come up with a completely different plan. And I'm going to shut the video off because I totally changed my plan. Okay, so I had a little bit of an epiphany while I was sketching stuff out on a piece of paper. I have these slabs that a friend of mine gave me to make a table for him. He gave me a whole bunch of slabs, and I actually didn't end up using about 3/4 of them. So this is a pretty decent thick piece of material. It's about an inch thick. Actually, it's about 5/4, give or take a little bit. And it has this nice little, still has a bit of a live edge to it. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to make the actual bases of the speaker stands out of this live edge material. I am going to paint these. It's a shame. I'm in somewhat a little bit of a rush because this ash turned black out in the sun, which was kind of cool. That's what this is. This is ash. Ash is really only good for firewood, and baseball bats. But I think for what I want to do, it'll be perfect. So I have this piece here, which comes into kind of like a point here, with two nice live edges and a nice flat spot here and a nice flat spot here. Now one edge is going to go up against the wall, so you'll never see it. So it can be squared off, which I'm not, it can be squared off. The other thing to do would be to get rounds, and I don't feel like going and prepping rounds. This is what I have laying around. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to arbitrarily pick a spot here, pretty much close to the pointiest part of the live edge. You can actually see this was killed by the ash borer. I live here in Pennsylvania. The emerald ash borer has basically killed every single ash tree in town, including 6 of my own, which cost me a considerable amount of money to get removed. And I let them all go because I don't have the facilities to mill these. My buddy's got a sawmill, which I didn't know until after I got rid of the wood. So what I'm going to do is I think I'm going to cut up right about here, and then I'm going to cut it again right about here. I already cut one hunk off. So let's just get my saw here. I'm going to go right about here, which is about the thinnest point. Well, there for the grace of God went I. And let's see here. And we're going to do this one right about here, I think. Whoops. Alright, so the wood's cut. That bird noise you hear is crows going after some hawks. Or American bald eagles, I'm not sure which. I have to go look. We have a contingent of bald eagles that fly around here. I've never seen the mature ones, but I have seen the juveniles. As a matter of fact, they ate one of my ducks, or they killed it. I'm not too fond of them. This wood's been aging, it's been cut, and it's been on the ground for almost 2 years now. So I'm going to set this piece aside because chances are I may end up having to do 2 of these bases. I may end up having to do 2. I obviously I don't have 4 live edges, I only have 2 live edges. So I'm going to set this one aside because this one, if I run this one through the planer once or twice, I square it up and I'm good. I'll have 1 live edge and 2 square edges. So this one's actually kind of, this is the one that caught my eye. This one's going to be a 3rd stop gap. I may actually end up just turning this into a cutting board. And these are what I'm going to turn into the base. Now let's move this stuff out of the way here. This is going to be posts. Probably this one is going to be a post. I don't know. I have to see what I have. The thickest material, like the largest stock, is what I want to use for the post. And it's going to be square. There's no, you know, it'd be cool if I had like sticks, but I don't have sticks. You know, if I like just took a log, stuck it on there, it would be kind of cool. So I'm going to actually shut the camera off. I'm going to take this stuff back outside and knock the bark off and take a little bit closer look at what I have to work with. I'm just at a cursory glance here. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut it. The easiest thing to do would be to cut it right about here. Piece of chalk. I think an artist would have chalk. I'm going to cut it right about here, I think. And then kind of go like this with it. So this front edge is going to be rounded, and then it'll be back here. The speakers aren't super heavy, so I'm not too worried about that. I do need a decent size bass, but I don't need a monstrous bass. And then, yeah, let me go get the bark off of this stuff. There's a guy, Blacktail Studios, he shows you how to get bark off. You don't need to watch me do it. Okay, so I ran these through the planer real quick. Just to give me a flat base. Like I said, these have been sitting outside in my shed, or sitting outside in my trailer now for almost 2 years. They were cut down. These pieces of wood are about 3 years old, so they're pretty much done. They are a little damp just from being outside, completely uncovered. So kind of what I'm trying, like, this is a total experiment for me. When it comes to this project's a total experiment for me. So if you lay these two on top of one another, they're relatively close to the same width. Live edge, it's not going to be 100% right. Now one of the things I want is I want this fade out here. I am going to have to cut these. There's no getting around cutting them. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to rough cut these on the bandsaw, kind of like this. Okay, so that's going to get kind of rough cut on. That's going to get rough cut on the bandsaw, And then this one's going to be the same way, and it's going to be right here where this starts to fade out. And we're going to go, actually going to go a little wider on this one. So it's going to kind of be like this. And then I think what I might do is I might just take a grinder or a sander or something, and I'm going to knock this edge back and kind of make it look a little wompy. Truth be told, these are going to get painted. This whole project's actually going to be painted. Now the speakers themselves are made, or they have this, it's supposed to be ash, and it has this look to them. They have a lot of grain in them. They're like semi-gloss shiny. I'm gonna just do these. My game plan is, once I get these cleaned up and I get them squared up and to make them look relatively nice, I'm gonna take some black paint that I have, some black latex paint, and I'm just gonna thin it out. I'm going to thin the black latex out, and I'm going to put it on so you can still see all the grain coming through and all these little imperfections coming through the wood. Now, the other thing is I want these to be about 13 inches. My finished length, the speakers are 8.5 by 11 3/4. So I want my base to be about 13 inches by whatever this width is. I'm not worried about this width at all. But it needs to be wider than 8 inches, and these are both wider than 8 inches, even at its thinnest point up here. This is still 8 inches wide. So that'll be enough stability. Like I said, the speakers aren't super duper heavy either, and I'm gonna put feet underneath these. So even though it'll need rubber feet underneath of it. So I'm going to go take these over on the bandsaw and cut them this way, and then I'm going to lay them up and then square them up that way. I'm not even super duper worried about them being square. That's not even really a overall concern. It's not even really a concern. But what I do need is a spot somewhere in the middle where I can mortise out, because I'm going to mortise and tenon these together for this, and then I got to figure out what I'm going to put on top. I may actually just make a square out of ash and then put a piece of plywood inside of it, so the edge will all be ash around the speaker base, which it should fit perfectly on the speaker base, and you'd never see that underneath of it's plywood, which is most likely what I'm going to do. Okay. So let's go do some trimming on the bandsaw. So I have this tool here. This one's super expensive because I bought this off the Snap-on guy. It's called a Crud Thug, and I purchased it originally to clean out. I used to use it for cleaning out caulk in cars, and because that stuff's like really heavy. Now, when you use it to clean out caulk in cars, this actually should be flipped over so these little arrow things are going the other way so they bite in. Whenever I use them on wood, I flip them the other way. The other thing is they make these in a much finer wire. This wire is pretty heavy. It's a pretty nasty tool. You got to be real careful with it. One thing is these little wires will fling out and hit you in the eye. Voice of experience. And it's made for metal, but I use it on wood here. They make a whole bunch of different companies make these nowadays. The biggest problem is these damn discs are about $30 a pop. So, and I can't find the fine grade ones anymore. So only thing I want to do here is take off the punky wood. I'm not finishing, I'm painting these. So I don't care about the patina. I don't care about what it looks like, the oxidation. I don't care about any of that because I am going to paint these. So you just take this thing here and dance across it I just want to remove some of this punky wood and the oxidation. Now this has a handle on it, but I'm not pushing real hard. I'm just letting it dance across just dance across it. I'm gonna take some sandpaper and just clean these edges up. I'm not gonna go crazy. Same thing with the side here. I'm just gonna take some like 80 grit paper or 36 grit paper and just clean the edges up so they're not super crisp and snappy offy. That's it. That's all I'm doing. This is all ash borer damage, by the way. This is what the ash borer does. That's what kills the tree. I think that'll do. That'll do, pig. That'll do. And a little bit more. All right, now I'm happy. Oakley dokley. Well, what did you miss? Well, you missed me cutting a bunch of wood. You can watch anybody cut wood on YouTube. I'm not going to spend a whole bunch of time, you know, setting up these beautiful shots of me running this, you know, pieces of lumber through a table saw. So we're going to skip right to the meat here. The first thing I had to do was sharpen my Forstner bit because it was duller than me. So I made a kind of an executive decision here. I am going to do just a little bit here more on camera just to show you how I'm going to fix some of these little issues I got going on. So this is, I ran these through the bandsaw. I still do have to sand the edges a little bit, but I wanted to just kind of go here. So I got a pin, I got a dowel pin here, I'm going to stick it in. And I have the posts. I'm not going to put this together all the way because I don't want to have to bang it back apart because it's pretty tight. So that's the way that's going to go. My drill press, my new Grizzly radial arm drill press, I didn't actually square it up properly to drill the holes. So one of the holes is not straight. So my game plan is I'm just going to put it together with the pin in it, and then I'm going to put a little tiny, it just needs a little bit of a shim on one side to straighten it. Left and right it's fine, so this way it's square, this way forward and backwards it's not square. That's okay, I can just put a little shim in there. Oh, there we go. I can put a little shim in it, no big deal. Remember, these are getting painted. The other thing I had to do was I had a little bit of a chip here on this piece. I'm not worried about it because it's going to get painted, but I did put a little bit of CA glue in there to straighten that out. Now the next thing, miters. So doing miters, I don't want to say doing miters is hard or impossible, but doing miters is really hard. And I make a lot of them, and you think I'd be a lot better at it. Now I have a special tool that I bought years ago that's like a shaver. You can see it in one of my other videos. I don't remember which video, but I shot a video using that shaver to square these up. If your stock isn't 100% perfectly square in every direction, and your angles are not 100% perfect, not exact, 100% 45 degrees, and all of your pieces are not equal lengths for both sides, you're going to get an unsquare square. And I'm going to demonstrate how I'm going to fix that, because this is going to be painted. Miter joints are inherently crappy joints unless you spline them, which I'm not going to do. You have to spline them or pin them to give them strength, because otherwise they're always one of the crappy joints. There's a lot of ways that you can make a miter look nice, or function as nice as it looks, because a well done miter joint is, quite frankly, beautiful, especially if you match the grain. Well, we're not doing that, because remember, it's getting painted. So I'm gonna put a little bit of glue on these. I will have to make sure I wipe the glue off, because when I say these are getting painted, I can't stress enough that it's getting painted, but it's more of like a stain that's going to go on these, not necessarily a paint. So I do need them to be kind of clean. I'm going to stain them black, not necessarily paint them black, if that makes any sense. Okay, so I'm going to set this up thusly. I'm going to throw this square in here. Now, ideally, this piece would be just a tiny bit larger, or I'd have a little bit smaller squares. I have neither. That's just the way this thing is going to go together. Isn't that great? Let's see. I thought I had another clamp right here, so I have one right behind me. So that's like that. Why am I clamping this? So I'm going to show you in a second why. Now, I'm not actually clamping this. I'm not actually clamping it. I mean, it is clamped, but the only reason I'm clamping it is to hold it so I can put some pins in it. I wouldn't normally do this for a miter joint, but because it's getting painted, I can't stress that enough. Ah! What are the chances? Hi. This is great. I do this all the time. I actually drove the nail into the nail. Oh, I gotta get that out of there. If this wasn't painted, this piece would be ruined. If this wasn't going to be painted, this piece would be ruined. But because I'm painting it, I'm going to go back and I'll set that in with a nail set in a second. What are the chances? And a 1 in 4 chance of screwing it up, and I screwed it up. So the way I'm going to fix that is I'll take a nail set and drive that thing in, and that'll be the end of it. Okay, so the pins are basically just acting as a clamp. Now, I got these as close as I possibly could to square. I'm also not really worried about matching the grain on these. It's really not an issue because it's getting painted. Glue. The other thing, and I didn't actually get this far because I still have to make these, is it's going to have a piece of plywood on the top, which you'll never, ever, 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 ever see the plywood. The speakers are literally going to be covering it. So it's going to get plywood. The only thing you will see is this outer edge. Now, even that is kind of limited. Now, these little plastic squares I bought at Woodcraft for this specific purpose. Make porpoise noises. Which is clamping these together. Dolphins. Postcards from the edge. Okay. Now I'm just going to kind of push that together. And I'm going to get these as tight as I can. And this clamping setup works pretty good for me. I've made hundreds of picture frames. I've done hundreds of miters, and especially stuff that I'm painting, I don't get too bent out of shape about. These pins are about 1.5 inches long. Okay, well, I didn't screw it up that time because I paid attention to what I was doing. All right, now we're going to take this one out. Okay. The nice thing about gluing and pinning is I don't have to actually wait a long time for the glue to dry. All right, look at that. It's not square. but it ain't bad. Okay, we're gonna check it for square before I put the final pins in. Before I put the pins in, I'll check to make sure it's square. One of the nice side things about having this grid on the table is it shows me kind of how square in or out of square I am, kind of like roughly. All right, so that's there, that's there, that's there. And then we put some glue on this one, spread it out a little. Put glue on this one. You'll notice I'm working on a piece of parchment paper too, because I don't want to ruin my grid here. I actually still use this thing for sewing. I have another one floating around here somewhere that's perfectly clean. I don't know where it is. This cutting mat was crazy expensive. Stupid expensive. I think this one was like 60 bucks and I ruined it pretty much immediately, so. Okay. I bought a cheap one somewhere. Which I don't know where that is. I had to. Okay, now we're going to clamp this square. Like I said, if I was doing this with some kind of beautiful, clear wood, if I was doing this with like some beautiful Clariol walnut or, I don't know, something stupid expensive, bird's eye maple, I would have got out my shaver and made these joints absolutely 100% perfect, but I'm not actually doing that. We're not doing that. We don't need that level of perfection with this joint. This is literally close as good enough, and as you can see here, that's about as close as it's going to be. So, got glue on my thing anyway. So it looks to me like we're about 32nd of an inch off, and I'm not going to lose any sleep over it. Don't leave your clamps out in the rain, kids. There we go. It's so rusty. I gotta clean them. I was using them for something outside. I was using them to hold a piece of wood on my outdoor picnic table. And I'm an idiot. Okay. Now, I'm gonna flip this over, check it for square-ish. Square-ish is square enough for this project. So I'm gonna say, we're gonna do this end first because it's the least happy. Let's just do a quick measurement here. We're 14 and 15/16. 14 and 15/16, which is actually dead to nuts for me. That's how I put a nail through my finger here. Yeah, this is definitely kind of, this is, Adam Savage calls these one-day builds, and literally that's what's going on here with this. This is a this is a one-day build, and obviously I'm no Adam Savage, but I can pull off a one-day build. Okay, I love this nailer, by the way. This is a Bosch Smart Point nailer. I have a Harbor Freight pin nailer that I bought that's, I don't want to say it sucks because I use the crap out of it, but it's really only good for staples and unimportant things. Okay, so there we go. Now the next thing I'm going to do Well, that's interesting. So you can see my joints are off here, which is fine because it's going to get flipped over like that. The only thing you're ever going to see on this board at all is maybe a 1/4 of an inch on the outside of this. Now the next thing I got to do is fix that screw up. So this is my body hammer. Don't ever hit nails with the body hammer. Now these are going to get, I have some wood filler, some plastic wood filler. They're just going to get a little bit of wood filler on them. Again, painted. This nail set here that's older than me. I'm 52. This thing's guaranteed older than that. Never knew nail sets went bad. That's why everybody has a bunch of them, that and you lose them. So that's as good as that's getting. And that's just cut it off, just countersunk it a little bit. I'm going to check it for square one more time before I set it aside. Some glue to dry. That's there. This isn't perfect. That's okay. We're going to just whack it on the sander real quick. Maybe a planer. Nah, I'm not even going to do that because it's pretty. Just real quick with a piece of sandpaper. (14 15/16). 14 and 15/16. That's about the squarest thing I've made all week other than me. Alright, so we're going to set this aside. The other thing you'll notice is I didn't cut the rabbet in this. I didn't cut the rabbet in it because it's easier for me to put it in the router. I'll put the rabbeting bit in the router on the table and then go around it. And then when I cut the piece of plywood to stick in here, I'll just round the corners on the plywood with the, just take it over to the sander and go and just round the corners off until it fits in there nice. You'll see that. I'll show how I do that. It is truly the easiest way to do it. Oakley dokley, where are we at, neighboroonies? Well, so I kind of screwed this up a little bit. This gap is a little wide. Not for nothing. I got to show this because this is what screws you up by a 1/16 of an inch. So you look at my tape here. Watch the tape. That's from abuse of the tape. That's generally why I use the same tape for every job. But that's a joke. There's a joke on the internet. It's like, why do I have trust issues? Well, that's one of them. When I'm doing cabinet work, I usually like to use this ruler. Where is it? When I'm doing small fine work, I will usually use this ruler. This ruler is actually it burns 1/8 off the end. So what you're supposed to do with all measuring tapes is burn the first inch. So you take your measurement from here, not from the hook. That was bush leak. So it's not an issue. It really isn't. So I stacked these up together. I squared these up on the table saw. This is what I had. It's just some 1/4 inch plywood I had laying around. I squared them up. I cut them a 1/16 of an inch too short. And here's the 16. You'll see it. It's actually almost a full 1/8. It's actually, they're almost 1/8 off. Because I wanted them to be a 1/16 of an inch off, and then they were a 1/16 of an inch off, so now they're 1/8 of an inch off. But not a good thing. Then I just rounded these corners over on my table sander to kind of get close enough to the radius. Now, when you look at this, you're like, oh, and that looks like crap. Well, it does, but it doesn't matter. You'll never, ever, 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 ever going to see this. The only thing that you're going to see is maybe 1/8 of an inch around the outside of these. The speakers themselves are 11 3/4 by 8 and about 8 1/2, I think. I forgot what I wrote. 8 1/4. So you're going to see just a little bit on the sides, and you're going to see just a tiny little bit on the ends. That's it. That's all you're ever going to see. As a matter of fact, all you're ever going to see is actually this part here. Also, this is sitting down a little bit in here. Well, it's sitting down a little bit in here because I'm going to sand this. I'm going to take and whack this with a sander real quick to level it out. So the next step is I need to take just a little bit, tiny bit more off of the corners on these pieces. I'm going to glue them down. Yeah, so I'm going to put a line of glue in here, glue it down. Put a pin. Actually, I might not even do that. Just put a pin in the corners, one pin in each corner, glue it, maybe put some weight on it, and then that'll be good forever because it actually fits really nice there. If I wanted to be really fancy pants, I could probably flip it over and leave it like this. And then you'd absolutely, positively, 100% never see any of that, and then the speaker would just be supported from the outside because it'd be the underside of it. But I don't necessarily want to do that. I kind of want to do it like this. So the final iteration of this is going to be like this, and then this is going to be in the center, holding it up like that, and then the speaker is going to sit on there. The speaker, the physical weight of the speaker is going to be borne by the plywood, not the ring on the outside. So it should be fine. Like I said, the speakers only weigh about maybe 10 pounds a piece, so that should be more than enough support for everything. Yeah, that's that. Like, so there's not really going to be a whole lot of weight on the edge. It'll just be here. But these need to be glued in really tight because I don't want them vibrating. I don't want them rattling. Now, yeah, I gotta clean those corners up just a little bit. So that's that. Okay, so I forget where I left off here. So let's talk about what I did, or where I've gotten to. So this is my good old hot glue gun here. Now I'm not going to use the hot glue gun to hold this together, which actually I could, but I'm not going to. I'm kind of still waiting for this thing to get good and hot. Yeah, it's not ready yet. This glue gun is just an old Craftsman. Had it for decades, but this booger gets hotter than hell. As a matter of fact, I burned the shit out of myself the other day with it. So what I did was I showed the parts to my wife, and she said, "Can you make the edges round?" I was like, "Yep, you know what, I can." So I ran everything through the router here. So I rounded off everything. Now this is the finish. This is going to be what it looks like. This whole thing is getting covered with the speaker. You're never going to see any of it. So I'm not too overly worried about it. I marked the center here, and I pre-drilled some holes in the plywood so I know where to put this piece. So basically the next step is, the next step's going to be to temporarily affix this to here, and then I'm going to run some screws in it. Now I already checked, well, I drilled through this way, so the burrs, or the burrs for the sake of argument, are on this side. And then this sits in here pretty flat, and I grabbed a square. I have this nice little square, and it's square to the base, pretty much. So push down on it, it's nice and square, which is important because it's not actually square to here because this hole's not square. And we're gonna fix that with this. When I cut one of these, I forget which one of these I cut, or what part I cut, I ended up with this really nice thin wedge. So we're gonna use this as a shim on the bottom here. You'll never see it. once it's shimmed up. So I want this glue to be like really, it's getting there. It's almost to the smoke point. If it's at smoke point, then it can then it flows a lot better. Hot glue is kind of funny that way. I like hot glue and hate hot glue. It has its uses, and this is actually a great use for it because I want to get this together relatively quickly, right? So I'm gonna put some hot glue here, not a lot, and I'm gonna press this down, swish it around a little bit, put a good bit of force on it. And then while it's still moist, you have about 20 to 30 seconds here. I'm going to run these screws in it. I love these Spax screws. They're kind of expensive, but they're really nice. Sadly, they're no good for exterior use, but they're great for this kind of stuff. So let's check it for square real quick again. That's square. Got a little squeeze out on the glue, but that's okay. We're square. Nice. I'm going to do the same thing with this. And so this is good and hot. Of course, I got the spider webs going here. I used a good bit of hot glue in the house to hold the wiring for this project together. These screws countersink and lock in pretty good. Okay. I forgot to check it. Yeah, it's pretty square. Good. Now the next step is, maybe I will use hot glue. I got it out. No real reason not to. Oh, yeah, you know what the reason is? Positioning. We're not going to use hot glue. This stuff does harden up real quick. We're not going to use hot glue with that. I'm going to set this thing aside so I don't burn myself with it again. Ah! Like hot lava. Good thing my fingers I don't have any feeling in my fingers anymore. Okay. Now, get the regular glue out. We're going to put some regular glue in here. Now, make sure these aren't too tight. Now these are a little tight, but there's actually some room around them, which is, you need to keep room around when you put, when you do this, you end up with hydraulic action. So I'll put the glue on this thing. You don't need a lot, and this is a pretty tight fit anyway. So Tap that in. Make sure we're not exceeding 1 inch, which we are by a good bit, so we're going to tap it in some more. These can't stick out more than 1.25 inches, and they're right at 1.25 inches, so we're going to tap them down a little bit more. Take a paper towel and clean the glue off of this side. And then we're going to set this one aside for a minute. You son of a bitch. Oh, there it is. Okay. Is it a spider web or is it hot glue? Okay. Now, same thing to this one. Just check to make sure it's not too tight. These are really tight. These are really tight. So, but they have room around them. They're really tight, but that's because they're not round. Dowels, wooden dowels generally aren't round. I found that out the hard way. I have a tool to make them round, but I don't need that tool for this project. All right. I over drilled this piece because I could. This I could only drill so deep. Give it another little bit more of a tap here. That actually sounds like it's all the way down. And we're good. Wrap this up. There's a little bit of a crack in this I didn't see until just now. I hope I didn't create that crack. It doesn't look like I did, but that's all right. These are not real load bearing. I mean, they're load bearing, but they're not crazy load bearing. Now, the next trick here is going to be to get these on here in kind of a that kind of orientation. Put a little bit of some glue in it here. So we're going to put some glue in this hole here. I could probably wait on this. It's not that big of a deal, but if you do it while everything's still a little juicy, you have about 30 minutes of working time with this. This is Titebond 3, or Titebond 2, Titebond 3? Titebond 3, I think is what it is. That's what I usually use. So I'm going to put some glue, not a lot, again, you don't need a lot. I watched this one dude, and he uses the least amount of glue I've ever seen anybody use. But then again, he also stresses how tight the joints are. So his theory is you don't glue. I forget what his theory is. His theory is my joints are so tight I don't need glue. And in theory, in some ways I think he's right. But now let's. It's crooked. Yeah, it's not so crooked. I like that. Now, we're going to check it for square, because this does want to be kind of square to the base. So that's not square at all. Not even remotely. So we're gonna where that super thin wedge is going to come into play here. I'm just going to take this and stick it in here. That's about as square as anything I ever make. Square and flat. I know this table is my table here is level. It's about it's not machinist level, but it's level enough. Table. It's level. Okay, now I'm going to take a razor knife and cut that. My 911 special here. Preferred by terrorists around the world. Snap that off. And that's going to be the dealio right there. Now, I know how off level the table is. So this is how off the table is let me see if that shows up. Yeah, can't quite see it on the camera. So just so this is how far off my table is. So if I put this on the table, I know that this is that far off. So if everything's the same amount off, then it's level. This table, apparently over the last 6 or 7 years, when I set this table in place, it was dead level. But what I did do when I made this table is I put foam underneath of it to help it conform to the floor. Well, apparently, over time, the foam was crushed. All right, now, part number 2. Now, I'm just gonna, I'm not even gonna, I screwed up, shocking. So that wants to be like that. This is the front. I mean, actually, this could be the front too. Now, the other thing I did, which kind of bears a little bit of mentioning here, is I took these over to my belt sander, and I used the edge of the belt sander and just kind of went all around it to give it kind of like an unevenness to the sand, but I thickened this edge up. This edge was like paper thin. So I sanded it back, and then I just took a little bit of hand sandpaper and sanded it back. Like I can't reiterate enough that these are actually going to get painted, so we're good to go. The other good thing is I cleared this with management yesterday before I went any further, and management actually really liked them, so we're good. We're good that way. This may be a stopgap. This may be the final plan. I would like to build speakers for there, but that project has got to wait for at least a year. So that's a 6 months to a year project. This is just to get them off the floor so it doesn't look so crappy. Is it boogers or is it glue? Only I know. That's boogers. Okay, now I'll stick that on there like that. I was originally going to orient these so they were totally square to the front, and then I changed my mind. When I rounded the edges, I decided to make it a triangle, like set it this way. So they're not square this way, they're kind of like a triangle. It looks pretty good. All right, now let's check it for square. I think this one was square. Oh, nope. Okay. This is not unexpected in any way. I knew it was like this. Okay, another little tap tap. That's weird. No, it's not weird. That's exactly what it's supposed to do. So now we get our little wedge out again. Sand wedge. Now that brought that in real nice, and it's just literally, 10th thou. It's not even that much to get it square. Of course, I put a little scar in it. That's all right. Getting painted. Okay, now let's check it for level. It does not look level. Oh, it is. It's a little off. It's good. We're level. Now, next step is going to be to paint them. Now, I'm going to let them dry for a couple minutes. Not really a whole lot of time. It looks a little crooked. You know what? It's okay. It's in the middle. This is in the middle of this. It just doesn't look like it. And it's plenty stable for what I'm doing. The other thing I'm going to do with these is I have all those rubber feet for my the cutting boards. I'm going to put rubber feet on the bottom of these. They'll have 4 rubber feet. Yeah, probably 4, maybe 3, but 3 rubber feet actually would work perfectly. And then I'm going to put rubber feet on top of these, pointing up, so when I set the speakers down on top of it, the speakers are sitting on rubber feet also. And you'll never see the rubber feet because that's kind of why I recessed that a little bit. Okay, the paint. Well, I have these things I bought at, I don't know where I got them. They're for painting stuff. These things are still wet, but I want to get them in the house and I want to get them set up. So we're gonna flip these things over this way I can get them in the house. I don't want them sitting on this lip here because this outer lip is something that you may actually see. So I make cutting boards, so I'm fairly sure I've put a video or 2 up of me making a cutting board. And I have these little rubber feeties that I buy for the cutting boards. So there's 2 ways to mount speakers. One is well, there's lots of ways to mount speakers. One is to use like spikes that come out of the bottom. I don't have anything that looks cool, so and you never see this stuff anyway. This goes back to, I'm tired of spending too much of my day tired of spending what seems like an inordinate amount of time doing things that nobody will ever see. And if you do see them, well, you went out of your way to see them. I'm going to put these 2 relatively close together here, and then I'm going to spread these 2 out. So basically we're at 3 points of contact. If this doesn't work, I can always move them around. But I'm kind of... I don't want to do 4 points, 4 spread out points. Yeah, I understand it's 4 points, but it's actually 3 in a geometry kind of way. Grab that from underneath there. That ain't bad. We'll put speakers on it and see what happens. Once it gets a little weight on it, it might be a little bit less tippy. If it stays tippy, then I'll put some more feet under it. But for right now, it's getting that. Now up here on the top, I actually am going to put 4. And I'm going to put it in all 4 corners. These things are cheap. The other thing I thought about doing maybe was putting a big piece of foam under it, but I've got some nice foam that I picked up. It's like black/gray foam. That I could stick on here. I don't want to put anything on the speakers themselves. It's a little tippy. This falls under the once they are where they're at, they should never be touched or moved. So it shouldn't be too big of a deal. Well, we'll find out. So that one's done. I'm really actually kind of looking forward to building the actual speakers, but that's a year away. That's a year away if I'm lucky. Biden inflation doesn't get the better of me. Again. We're gonna put these a little further apart in the back. And this one, I may have to move those other ones. They're a little too close to the inside. This one's a little tippy. I don't know. We'll see. We shall see how this goes. The paint is still wet. Actually, I may end up having to leave these out in the garage for a little bit longer because they smell bad. I have a feeling that if I take these in the house and set them up, I'm going to hear about the stink. I'm almost 90% positive I'm going to hear something about smell. As a matter of fact, what I ought to do is, just because it would be funny, would be to go in, set the camera up, take these inside, let them sit there for a couple minutes, and then record what's that funny smell. But that's also a great way to get a divorce. Okay, that's that. This one. Yeah, we're gonna move that one. And oops, and here they are in position. So we got one there and one there. I'm pretty sure Ralphie's not gonna like that, but oh well. He doesn't sleep in that bed anyway. And then here's so those two are actually just now surround speakers, and then that's obviously the center channel. And upper, and then the 2 rears. Ignore that one in the middle. Oh, and then sub. Sub. And my newly renovated AB closet. And that sticker has to stay there or something bad will happen.